Lenke. I'm with Sarens and based in Aachen, Germany. And today I'm going to talk about an interesting topic for all of us, in-car commerce. I'll do this together with my colleague, Dhruv Gupta. He's the product manager for what we call Sarens Pay. And together we'll walk you through our view on how in-car commerce can be made successful. With that, Dhruv, please bring up the slides and we can get started. Very good. So as you can see, here are our titles again. We are both with Sarens, and if you go to the next slide, allow me to say a few words about Sarens, because not everybody in the audience may know who we are. The thing is, we are a young company and an old company at the same time. We were spun out of a much larger company called Nuance 2 years ago. Many of you will know Nuance, and they're now a famous reputation because they have been acquired by Microsoft for a record amount of money. And we were spun out before that, so we are a totally independent company called Sarens, listed on the NASDAQ, and we were formerly Nuance's automotive division. So we are fully focused on the mobility space, automotive, but also other vehicles and so on. We are headquartered in Burlington, close to Boston, but we are a very international company with populations of employees in Asia, in Europe, in Italy, Germany, and so on. And we actually ship embedded and cloud technology for cars. We do this quite successfully. Every other car being shipped is something from our software on board, and we have done this so far to 200 million vehicles. Next slides. Thank you. And actually, if you think about it, speech has gone a long way as part of Nuance and before in former companies. We have worked on this since the 1990s. Back then, you had something like digit recognition or name recognition for voice dialing. Later, we added destination entry for navigation. Then came dictation, then came all-in-one menus, then came the full voice assistants and so on, including other features like in-car voice biometrics. So a speech system today is really a full voice or AI assistant, helping you with everything in the car, from controlling the car over finding information on the internet, composing messages, and so on. It's really a totally different experience from, say, 20 years ago, when the only thing you could do in the car was call somebody. And so the question is, what's next? And one topic that everybody is looking at, and next slide, please, Dhruv, is in-car commerce. And we all read those reports a couple of years ago where we were really promised riches. You see the numbers here, the value pool of $450 billion to even $750 billion or $230 billion in commerce behind the wheel and so on. So really the promise of a lot of money to be made in cars. And I think the promise is still there. It's only that it has not come to full fruition as of yet. So as those of you know who are in the industry, the billions have not started to come in as predicted. And the question is, how will we make it successful? Because the market is definitely there. We just need to do it the right way. And that's what we're going to talk about a little bit today. So if you look at what's happening today, you have really a fragmented experience. If you look at it from a user perspective, the user journey, although is in the car, involves a smartphone, maybe for listening up to a service, for completing some of the authentication potentially. You have to do something on the head unit, something maybe even on a web portal of sites. You have to create accounts upfront, bring them to your car and so on. That's really not a good user experience. And the vision we have been working on instead, and if you click forward, thank you, is a more integrated experience that combines in-car commerce with what we spoke about earlier, which is the voice in the car, and makes it a seamless solution, fully integrated with the voice assistant and giving users a much better experience. Yeah, and we'll see next what the advantages of that are. Again, voice is our starting point, and you can see on the right-hand side what people do with voice in the car. And you can see, although we've come all that long way, yes, phone and messaging is still a large portion of it. The other big portion is navigation, logically. And why don't we use that and proactively suggest things to users who do navigation requests? If you think about it, many of the in-car commerce elements, like finding and paying for parking, finding a restaurant, paying for fuel, and so on, they all come easily from navigation requests. You can see it here. Somebody's navigating somewhere. We suggest to them proactively, hey, do you want me to reserve your parking spot? Or it's going to be late when you arrive. Do you want me to make a restaurant reservation for you? That way, people don't have to discover it. They don't have to remember there is an app. They will be reminded. Yeah, next slide. And in this vision video that we did last year, actually, we show how the vision works for us. And yeah, please have a look.
Hey, Sarence. Drive to Minetta Tavern.
Starting navigation to Minetta Tavern. Your destination seems pretty busy this evening. Do you want to reserve parking ahead of time?
Oh, sure, thanks.
How long do you need to park for?
Until 9, I guess.
Okay. The best match is a parking lot on Mulberry Street. It's $24 for 2 hours. Should I make the reservation?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, you're all set. I emailed you the QR code. Just scan it at the gate and drive along to find your reserved spot.
Sarence Pay.
Thank you. So what you could observe is it started with a navigation request. So the person didn't have to remember she can pay for parking. She was reminded proactively once she did the request. Then she liked it and accepted it, which will drive adoption. Then there was embedded voice biometrics for authenticating payment and making it really safe. And you will see later in Drew's part of the presentation, people really do care about safety of the transaction and so on. So voice authentication is an important element, and it was all done by voice. Yeah, so that was how we envisioned the service to work. Since we did the concepts, we actually have implemented it, are pretty much on our way to getting it deployed into cars. And the next slide. Here's what Therent Pay is all about. Just to give you the gist of it, it's actually not a monolithic block. Instead, we have various components. Maybe Drew, if you can advance to next element. So on the left-hand side, you can see the authentication element already mentioned. Could be by voice, for example. The integration, our advantages, we already in cars today. So there is this integration of the speed service on the head unit and on the OEM side of their cloud and our cloud, actually. So this is something we can leverage. It's a fully hybrid solution residing in the cloud, doing onboard what's necessary there. We also bring the agreements with merchants and the UX experience. As you could see, working from the user experience is how we usually do things. Next slide. What it's all about, of course, is a merchant ecosystem. You can see here the total flow. On the left-hand side, you can see we let this all flow from user management of the OEM. So you don't have to bring multiple accounts. Instead, accounts are created automatically, starting with the user ID owned by the OEM. That's very important to them. So they own the relationship with the customers and they get the data also. You can see there would also be an e-wallet tied to this. So you have the credit cards and all this stored there, so you can pay for things. And this is then used in all the merchants on the right-hand side. Yeah. We don't process payments ourselves. We bring in partners as needed as a payment gateway for the e-wallet. Very often the OEMs have made their choice already also, but we bring the ecosystem of partners on the right-hand side. I can only mention a few here. We have the restaurant reservation with 3 big platforms in the US and Europe. We have fuel with partners in the US and Europe. We have parking and so on, working on toll, EV charging, so everything really relevant to drivers. And all these merchants here offer attractive options to us and to our customers, but also creating extra revenue for commissions, for additional purchases in convenience stores and so on. So this is how we build the ecosystem. And with that, I'll hand it over to Dhruv, who will run you through the vision, how we see its work, and especially how users perceive it. So a lot of the UX work we have done and what people expect of it. With that, I'll hand over to you, Dhruv.
All right, so fantastic. So moving forward, looking about how we kind of scale the experiences, right? So this platform is not saying that we throw out the current navigation platforms that we have in place in the current, let's say, OEM which are running on the road. So let's say we are still talking about the experience which are tied to find restaurants or getting gas and so on. So it's a smooth transition taking the user from the current experiences and towards the transactions as such. Yeah. Moving forward, I would like to, let's say, talk about how we get to these experiences and how we design them. So one part of the, let's say, most important element is the UX and the UI. There we have something called as a Drive Lab, who's responsible for the whole research that goes on at Cerence. Yeah. And then I will talk about, let's say, a few of the case studies that we have, let's say, talked about in the use cases, and each of them will go through different phases of the research. I have different flavors to that. So starting with a restaurant reservation on knowing the user adoption, if we talk about the automotive context as such. Yeah. So starting to, let's say, ask people on how do you think using the in-car voice assistant to make a reservation at the restaurant, how likely are they willing to do that? So you can see that approximately 50%, more than 50% of the people say it's definitely or probably they would like to try that. And it was very clear that after the concept video, participants were most likely to have the reservation made using the voice assistant as such, right? And then if we talk about what people are already doing as of today, so we did ask people if they have managed to call a restaurant while in the car, or call a restaurant to make a reservation, or even did an online reservation using the smartphone while in the car. So it's pretty clear that more than 70% of the people have done that already. So this is something which people automatically contextualize with automotive setting. And that is kind of a clear indication that, okay, voice assistant can certainly support in this. Yeah. And further on, it was about, let's say, what's the benefit of having a voice assistant to make these reservations, right? So 50% of the people said it's the most convenient way to do it. So this is something which is coming directly from the end users who tell us, okay, this is how they would like to do it. And other insights were some people do not like to talk to somebody and then they just want to have the system digitally done doing the reservation. So these are all those insights which tell us very clearly that, okay, a restaurant reservation using a voice assistant in the automotive setting is of clear big use. Yeah. Moving forward, then we did a little bit of, let's say, large scale payment survey to understand, okay, if people would like to use voice assistant for making payments for different use cases, right? The starting one was, so we did showed them a little bit of this conceptual video of the parking use case. And then we asked the user how likely are they willing to use such a feature. So you can see that 65% of the people said either they are very likely or likely to use such a feature in the car. So once we did that, we asked the user what's the preferred payment type while they're driving. So 51% of the people said voice. It's true that the voice is eventually connected to a credit card or an e-wallet, but for a user, the voice seems to be very easy and simple to use. For them, it's about the convenience of not pulling out the card or the phone when they're needing, right? And if now I have to kind of categorize a little bit of use cases, what's kind of biggest pain point that we see of a driver, right? So parking seems to be the winner. It's no doubt parking is a pain still for users, and 64% of the people said they are very likely to adopt such a feature for doing voice payments for within the car experience as such, right? And then moving on to gas, drive-through, car wash, coffee, and takeaway. So coffee and takeaway are much more oriented towards the North American market. Car wash was a clear surprise also for us, as we didn't think it is that much likely that people are willing to have for car wash as such, right? So moving on, I now have, let's say, another, let's say, different kind of a study, which we did it for fueling experiences to understand what's the mental model of the end user who's involved in the fueling experiences as such. So talking a little about also the background here, how the fuel study was conceptualized. So we wanted to understand a little bit of user psychology and the influences around the experience of purchasing or paying for fuel. Then we did had a kind of a proof of concept trying to show them, okay, this is how they will do it. So it's was all about observation and gathering some feedback, and finally evolving into the mental model of the user that we can reflectively back to the voice assistant to help and get that better, right? So this was a little bit of more towards the qualitative part of the study, and how we accomplished that is kind of a very role play and a guided visualization, showing the concept video and then trying to understand what the user, let's say, reactions are. So in kind of, let's say, the findings, what we did is we kind of separated the user journey into different aspects. One was the search experience, then is the paying experience, then is the leaving or drive off from the fuel station as such. So if we have to kind of, let's say, compare across these findings, and then what was a little bit of more surprise for us in terms of all these common elements amongst various contenders. One was the availability of the various grades of food. So this was not certainly that we thought was very clear, but it came out very evident from, let's say, most of the users saying, okay, they would like to know what grade of fuel the fuel station has. Then having a little bit of more advanced comparison and a calculation function within the car voice assistant saying, okay, this is how much it will take to fuel up your tank, this is the cost, and then this will be the probably the most cheaper options available. So this is what the user are perceiving the voice assistant to be a little bit more towards the smarter side of things. Yeah. Adding towards more insight on this, let's say, study is users kind of associated with emergency or non-emergency situations. And then the regular ones being the privacy policy and then the feature cost of such a feature. So some of the users felt that this particular advanced feature of voice assistant having to pay could have additional cost on their side, which may or may not be the case. And then a lot of people also associated it with different utilities, right? So they wanted to extend these features. So it seems like the fueling experiences are tied to either the supermarket, grocery experiences, or let's say getting for a coffee and so on. So this is also which came out quite clear. And then finally, if I have to conclude about what's the concept, let's say, likeliness of the end user. So it's pretty clear the scores of four on a 5-point scale, saying that, okay, they would like to have such a feature. And then also they feel the system is quite secure already to have such a system in place. Yeah. Further on, so this is kind of still a work in progress study about the food ordering experiences. So what we see how people would like to buy fuel or buy food right now, how they order it. So first of all, we wanted to understand saying, okay, how are people browsing the restaurant menus as of today? So it's pretty, let's say, diverse, right? So some of the people are already having a restaurant in mind. They already have a dish in mind. So that's pretty clear. So this is kind of a limited set of people. And then you have these other category of people where they have the cuisine type or the dish in mind. They just do not have the restaurant. They just want to experience it. I mean, maybe a better restaurant and so on. So it's about how might we as Sense or voice assistant platform enable to offer these services to the end user, right? And then when we talk about how people are ordering, so if you look at their ordering history and so on, they seem to be ordering from the same restaurants eventually, right? So it might be the case that people have a dish in mind, but they're browsing a couple of restaurants, but eventually end up ordering from the same restaurant that they have in mind already, right? Then, so if we also look at, let's say, the ordering history of the end users, how they are doing it as of today. So it's most likely the case that they have about 3 restaurants consistently in mind. So it's either or going in back and forth case, and then choosing with, let's say, starting the common option with food and cuisine, and then going back to the restaurant choice. Yeah, that seems to be kind of pretty evident in the survey as such. So if now we ask people, okay, you have a certain set of order, so if would you like to make some modifications, what would you like to do them? Yeah, within the same previous order history options. Yeah, so 27% of the people said that they would not change anything at all. So this is something that they just have repeated orders as they have already ordered from a couple of ordering websites and so on. So this is something that, okay, repeat my order from Uber Eats or something like that. Yeah, so this is of that category, which is still a large segment, I would say. And then some of the people have kind of made small little modifications, saying having some extras of ketchup and so on, and then changing the items or the size or the quantity of the drinks or the portion size and so on. And some people tend to add a little bit of items as a desserts and so on. So this is still, let's say, minor modifications on the existing same orders that people have. So that kind of goes to show how we could, let's say, design a little bit of MVP approach and go on to scaling it further. Yeah. So if now we ask people how likely are they willing to reorder the same meals through a voice assistant which is built in the car, so 60% of the people said either they are likely or very likely to do that. So this again goes to show that, okay, there is a certain potential wherein, okay, we can influence this and help this user and make it possible. Yeah. So based on these couple of, let's say, studies for the food ordering experiences, we have some implication that goes back on designing the food ordering experiences on the VA side eventually. So the first was pretty clear that that was the case, that users would like to have the ability to browse the restaurants and the menu, but they might eventually go on to choosing the same part that they have. So this was pretty much concurrent in a lot of user studies. So this one that I'm talking is eventually the third one. So the previous two, which were the smaller ones, had the similar approach in that. And then it's also pretty clear that it's pretty small, saying, okay, you can start with something and then go on to eventually build something larger. Yeah. So the other implication is most users can name the restaurants familiar that they have. So they already have the potential in mind, saying, okay, Domino's or a sushi and so on. So it's either choosing a cuisine or a particular food type or a particular restaurant that they have already in mind. Yeah. Then the next thing is, which is also a little bit new, saying that, okay, within the order history. So if you talk about what's the order history and how long it is, usually people have more than 10, let's say, past orders from the same provider. So, and then when you talk about the VA side, it's a little impractical to have read out all this list. So we need a little bit of more smarter voice assistant who can contextualize based on, I don't know, maybe by time and the date, and or give some offers. Yeah. And at the same time, we want to have some kind of a visual interface to this. So having some visual confirmation for the user as well. So lastly, I think I just wanted to highlight on the food ordering experiences, which were still ongoing. So when we talk about the frequency, so 96% of the people are ordering at least a month. So these are already a little bit of users who are actively using these food ordering services. And so they seem to be a good target group for us. And if I have to talk about the application, so it's about, let's say, varying from Uber Eats to Grubhub to whatnot, right? So this is also the case. And then now what we tend to do next is look at how immediately that's influencing and contextualizing within the automotive context, right? So how much of these orders were, let's say, either within the car or outside the car and so on. So and which ones are the ones that we can, let's say, enable it through the voice assistant as such. So this is kind of how we Serens approaches, let's say, enabling the experiences as such. So we are very user driven in that case, and trying to enable and empower the end user to have all these features of in-car payments as such. With this, I would like to thank everyone, and if there are any questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you.